This is the Messiah Hour with Ari Louis.
Welcome, everybody, to today's episode of the Messiah Hour here on Israel Sports and News Radio. Thank you for joining us. And we have a very special segment today. At any time, you can email us at messiahhour@gmail.com, or you can email the station at Israel Sports and News Radio at gmail.com. People are very concerned about the quote-unquote troops that President Obama is sending to 6 states in the Southwest. Also, people want to know what is the latest with rockets being launched into Israel. On the line right now to discuss this, the author of Time to Be Free, 5773, and two-time national karate champion of the United States. Back to the program, Paris David Blumenthal. How you doing out there, Mr. Blumenthal?
Well, good, Ari. Thank you so much for having me back on your show. Appreciate it.
Yes, indeed. It was certainly long overdue, and there is so much to talk about. Let's go first, actually, with President Obama. A lot of people are concerned about what exactly he's doing with the 6 states in the Southwest. He claims it is a type of training exercise to deal with the public. A lot of people are concerned it may set up for some type of martial law, and I posted this on my Facebook. We got a lot of feedback. I wanted to get your thoughts on the matter.
Did you say martial law? See, I study martial arts.
That's right.
And
that's why I'm having you on. I figured, it was a good tie-in.
Yeah, they both have the same discipline, martial.
Yeah.
Remember, just like in martial arts and martial law, there's always an action followed by a reaction. And Obama's action of having troops is a reaction to something. Now everybody's questioning, what is that reaction? Well, we'll have theories, but all of that information is readily available to you on the internet or any of the major newspapers if you're able to connect the dots. For instance, Greece has just collapsed only a few days ago. A lot of people that's starting to hit the news and understand the ramifications of that, meaning that they will not repay the troika, the euro. They're pulling out of the eurozone. Does that mean Spain, Portugal, Germany may start printing the mark again? And Italy may say, hey, we don't have to pay because they don't have to pay. Then, thus, the collapse of the European euro, their major currency across Europe, which also interlaces itself with the U.S. dollar. What else is the United States dollar? It's known as the petrodollar. Something very interesting that you should know, and it's a fact, is that Russia has overtaken the world, Saudi Arabia especially, as China's #1 oil supplier. What does all this mean to do going back to martial? Well, martial law is the result of, over a period of 7 years, the U.S. petrodollar is not being used anymore. It means that the dollar is going to get weaker and weaker and weaker. The interest rates on the dollar will definitely go up if there are less people buying it, especially in the Treasury section and bonds. So the bonds in the Treasury start to collapse. The dollar's interest rates may have to go up, and then thus the dollar inflates. What does that all mean? We go back again. Why is he dispersing troops? If there's a sudden collapse of the U.S. dollar, imagine people's bank accounts being wiped out, people not able to get their Social Security benefits, people not able to get their welfare benefits. From top to bottom, it can create chaos and havoc across the United States of America. Perhaps this is a prelude to what could be happening, or maybe he's preparing a drill when it does happen. But what is paper worth? Whatever the paper has printed on it eventually will become zero, meaning that fiat currencies such as the U.S. dollar will eventually be a zero value after everybody finds out that it's worthless. All money, printed money, is worthless. It's just that we have the faith that it's real.
Yes, and a lot of people, this will be a bit of diversion of what we're talking about, but a lot of people still think that the dollar bill is based on the gold standard, but that's not true, correct?
No, it was taken off the gold standard decades ago. Remember, in 1913, Woodrow Wilson signed in the Federal Reserve to take over the printing of money. And if you look in the Constitution, it says that it's illegal to print money by any state within the Union as a republic. It can only mint coins, gold and silver. So somewhere along the line, a lot of people didn't know that. So if you say a lie enough times, it becomes a lie, and meaning that they were printing money all this time without any gold-backed securities, etc. And that was taken off the gold standard by Richard Nixon when Charles de Gaulle wanted to be paid a debt that was owed by the United States, and he only requested it in gold, no paper. So Richard Nixon had to go in and take that money out, if there is any more gold left in where. And it's a scary notion that perhaps the whole world and the trillions of dollars that have been printed, way beyond the amount of gold that's available in the world, will turn to nothing. Euro, U.S. dollar, we're talking about any other major currency, will basically fall apart. That's why they form BRICS. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and there's South Africa now involved, where they're going to have an alternative bank. And many countries have already signed on to that bank, knowing that the U.S. dollar's demise is coming soon.
So perhaps this idea you're saying, maybe that once people find this out, once it's more known, the dollar turns to nothing, people panic, perhaps a riot, Obama's sending these quote-unquote troops in, but those troops, are they armed enough to handle the whole public? Because these 6 states in the Southwest, one of them's Texas, one of the more popular states in the Union, Arizona, my home state, a little nervous about that, but Phoenix is the 5th largest city in the country. So can these troops handle all these people if they all riot?
Well, let me. I want to make sure that it's not going to be suddenly, the next day the dollar's worthless. It's going to be over a period of years as you see it now, and then months. And then it may take a year before it finally deflates like a balloon, slowly as the air is being let out of it. But yes, like anything else, these are troops. If they're using troops within the country, are they going to fire upon their own people? Is he going to have immigrants within it? Is he going to use UN troops? Those are a lot of questions that have to be answered. But remember, the U.S. is probably the most armed country for its citizens of any other country in the world. So they know they're in for a fight if there's something that's unfair that could be detrimental to the citizens of the United States of America.
And we talked about this, I think about a year ago, about there's the theory that President Obama's not going to leave when it's time for him to end his presidency. What do you think is going to happen in that regard? Do you think he'll somehow stay on, or will he pay way for the winner of the 2016 election?
Well, the way things are going now, as we all can see, the odds are that he'll still remain on. It denotes if there's any major crisis, environmental, it could be economically, or a war. And it looks like it's pointing to all three. I mean, we've seen some major upheavals from earthquakes, volcanoes, etc. going on right now, including floods. And now next you have economic concerns. You could see Europe. If people don't believe me, just look what just happened with Greece. It's a huge red flag. And by the way, I just bumped into somebody who just got back from the Ukraine, a friend of mine who was principal of school there with her husband and moved to Ukraine suddenly. She came back. It's a war-torn country, which you don't hear a lot about. And she said the U.S. dollar is not even accepted over there. And they're using, I forgot the name of the currency they're using in Ukraine off the top of my head right now. But basically, you can rent an apartment for equivalent to $100 a month now. The whole economic system in Ukraine has collapsed. And this is what you're eventually going to see. And what you're seeing in Ukraine could possibly be brought to Europe and the United States via how many of those troops can handle it. Well, Ukrainian troops are doing their best, with the Russians quietly involved in this whole thing, and I'm sure the U.S. is involved with a proxy of the Ukrainians. But to answer your question back to if they can handle it, I don't know. I mean, it's to what force? Force will be met with force. Remember the ranch situation, the Bundy Ranch, the militia, the U.S. citizen militia, was able to outmaneuver the SWAT teams, FBI teams, and any other teams that they sent over there. They backed down because the citizens had a heart to saying, this is our land, we're going to protect it. And when you've got, as they say, it's how big is the dog? No. Or how big is the fight in a dog? No, it's how big it is within the dog for the fight. And that's what we're going to talk about, I guess, in the next 6 months when we read the newspapers to see what's going on.
Again, this is the Messiah Hour here on Israel Sports and News Radio. My guest is Paris David Blumenthal. We're talking about the quote-unquote troops President Obama sent into 6 states in the Southwest. One of the things I want to touch upon with you is a lot of people who are members of the military, obviously they're prideful people, love the United States, and it would seem weird of them, let's say, turning on their own citizens. Talk about a bit of that aspect, if there is some type of brainwashing going on, or if they've kind of changed their morality if they are going to do this. So give us your thoughts.
Well, if they're going to continue to do this, I think it's just self-preservation. Somebody wants to stay in power, they're going to stay in power. So they'll do whatever they have to make orders to the military, to reserves, whoever it may be, to be called up. That's why they're trying to federalize the police departments, if you've noticed that. Then the Washington, D.C. has power over them, as opposed to state and city municipality run police departments. Think about that. If you have a federal police department, you take all your orders from the federal government. Otherwise, they have to take orders from their state, which would supersede the national government rules and laws if they have to.
All right, let's real quick before we go to the situation in Israel. I just want to get your thoughts about the latest Supreme Court decision. This is only a week ago on Friday, to allow gay marriage in all these states of the Union. I want to know if you think that's going to be any type of factor, if that's something kind of on the side. It's just interesting that the story with the troops and this seems to kind of occur at the same time. I want to know if that's all related, in your opinion.
I don't see people rushing to the streets and having a civil war over that genre of homosexuality. Lesbians and gays, people fighting in the streets over that, especially in conservative states such as Texas, Oklahoma. It's not a major issue. I think the major issue is going to be an economic issue, where people's bank accounts and stores and the whole national economy are affected. That's where you get people to really feel something and run to the streets, when their pocketbooks and their pockets are being affected, not necessarily a disagreement or an agreement on a particular person's way of life. That's my opinion. I don't see it that way.
Well, do you think, I guess the way I would say is, it almost feels like Obama, through the past years of his presidency, has distracted the people with this issue, gay marriage, also the whole birth certificate thing. My theory was he kind of put that out there, if he has one, if legitimate, not to kind of take our minds off something else. And maybe that something else was this troop situation. So do you think perhaps the president distracted the American public with other issues when his main concern was this what's going on in the Southwest?
I don't know if it's a distraction, it may be, but it's more of his ideology, which we had talked about before in previous sessions. It's his ideology. He felt that he wanted to do this before he leaves as president of the United States, if he does. His legacy, that he has gay marriage and whatever else. I mean, who knows what about his personal life? Maybe that has a lot to do with it too. If somebody is very strong-willed about something, maybe that's their lifestyle, and they feel very strongly about it. Just a question mark there.
Very interesting. Again, this is the Messiah Hour here on Israel Sports and News Radio. My guest is Paris David Blumenthal. Let's go to the situation in Israel. Last year, of course, there was the war in Gaza, and whatever people like to say, I don't really feel that Israel won that war. I think they just kind of bought some time, it took a break, etc. A lot of people think there'll be something on the horizon this summer. There have been more rockets, especially last week. I mean, there are rockets all the time, but more of an increase last week. So give us your thoughts heading into this summer and potential conflict of Arabs and Israelis.
Well, we've heard Daesh in Arabic, or known as ISIS, and to Obama it's known as ISIL, has definitely moved itself into Gaza. The Egyptians are very concerned. The United States, the United States is aware of it as well, especially in Syria, with them helping with the Air Force. But in Gaza, the circumstances are very dangerous for Egypt and Israel. And Israel just closed the border a few days ago, if you're not aware of it, in Sinai, because of the attack on the Egyptian troops there by ISIS. They had a car bomb, and there were highly trained troops that used that as talk about diversions. How's that for a diversion? And they went in, and Egypt has not released the total amount of casualties, but they were very high for that location. So we're looking at Hamas is losing power. They've even wanted to sit down at the table with Israel and negotiate a 5-year peace treaty. That means they're desperate. That the even Middle Eastern mentality to do something like that, they are desperate. And you got to remember too, the United Nations is basically bankrupt. All the money that they used to get in aid after war, it's no longer there. And not only are they financially bankrupt, the UN has been unfortunately morally bankrupt for years, as we all know. So therefore, they're not receiving money. Saudi's probably not sending any money because there's no reason for them. There's nothing to gain from it. Qatar has stopped the funds coming in. Iran was going to help Hamas, but now that's been cut off. So there's a lot of, again, it's economic strife going on over there and power. That ISIS will probably end up taking over Gaza, but they've got two armies to contend with, both the Egyptian and the Israeli armies. So I don't know if it's the greatest decision for them because they're going to be boxed in and they know it. That's why they're freer to move through Libya, Iraq, and Syria. If that answers your question, they're going to make a little bit of trouble. They're hoping to get Israel into it, and then maybe the Arab world will say, hey, we're on your side. That's their only hope and their plan. And these rockets coming in might be a prelude to hoping to drag Israel into a major war in Gaza and get the world sympathy, where actually ISIS is looming in the shadows to take it over.
Wow, so this could set up the stage for something potentially very, very big?
It could. I think the bigger problems in the north, on the Syrian border, the Golan Heights. There are so many different Arab tribes really at war within the armies. I mean, you've heard how the rebel troops were firing upon each other recently. It's bizarre over there. It's just all tribal, and it's very complicated. And one tribe. I mean, even their Arab tribes, they cannot intermarry. If they do, families will be wiped out. So you can just imagine what's going on the battlefield when you give these tribes guns. You see it right now in Syria. The imagination doesn't need to go very far. Just read the newspapers, how many people have been killed. So that's a big thing. And then you've got to remember, Beirut, Lebanon, has over 210 tons of gold, probably the 14th or 15th largest holding in the world. Obama just gave Iran back 12 tons of gold, if you heard, through South Africa. So everybody knows that again, we come back to the petrodollar falling apart, the U.S. dollar. They're all going after gold. So that could probably be the biggest prize is in Lebanon. Hezbollah wants to guard it. It's the Iranian money there. They want to guard it. And ISIS is looking at shops and saying, hey, I'd like to take this booty and put it in our pockets. A lot of action going on over there.
Well, we're certainly living in interesting times, no doubt about that. Again, this is Messiah Hour here at Israel Sports News Radio. My guest is Paris David Blumenthal. We're talking about the latest in Israel. You know, last year I remember very vividly during the war in Gaza how there was not always a lot of support as far as the media for the United States. You know, I joked about that about MSNBC. If this happens again, you still expect the same type of media coverage where those who hate Israel are just going to pile on and not really look at the facts?
Well, right now, you mentioned a diversion by the President of the United States in regards to gay marriage. How's that for a major diversion? You've got people's heads being cut off left and right in Syria and Iraq and Yemen and Libya. And all of a sudden, Israel comes in and actually puts a little scratch on an Arab terrorist while they're bringing him to prison. And the world is like, wow, look what happened. Think about that as a diversion. It's an obvious one, and it's foolish and it's ridiculous. Some people, even who are anti-Semitic, are just going, I can't believe this.
Yeah, I've never understood why the media unfairly puts Israel in a situation. It's almost they charge them 1,000 times whatever another country is doing when Israel's just trying to protect itself again. And that's part of the reason I wanted to do this show, is to put the truth of what's going on. So if you touch a little bit more about Obama's support with Iran with the gold, because a lot of people think that's where the final scene of everything's going to happen. Iran will have the nuclear bombs and start World War III. So why would Obama send them gold?
Well, that was here. It was an article that was just came out not so long ago in Israel National News. It's available on major news networks. It says after, basically, they said Iran receives 13 tons of gold in sanctions relief. Well, I can say, well, wasn't that a relief? Pepto-Bismol, anybody? After signing the 2013 interim deal, Iran was given $4.2 billion in sanctions relief, and last year Obama threw another $2.8 billion to the leading state sponsor of terrorism. And they're going to go forward. Can you imagine an ISIS group with nuclear bombs? Well, that's what Iran is, basically. So they just got 13 tons of gold in sanctions relief. And that was from 2 years it was being held and locked up in South Africa. Because people don't know this. Iran doesn't use the U.S. dollar when it sells off its oil. It only accepts cash, the cash being gold. I don't know if you knew that. And remember, Saddam Hussein lost his life because he was trading in gold, and the U.S. attacked it. Remember, Libya, Gaddafi lost his life because he was trading in gold. But Iran, for some reason, is Mr. Teflon, and they haven't, and there must be some sort of agreement. But everybody's trying to sway Iran to be going their way. The U.S. wants Iran as an ally, and so does Russia and China. So whoever can sweeten the pot, and Iran knows it, it's going to get the best deal. They think that maybe Iran could use those new weapons against Russia and China as opposed to the U.S., but I don't see that happening. Do you?
I don't think so. Obviously, time will tell, but it's something to definitely keep an eye on. And I want to go to the story that you posted on your Facebook a couple of days ago regarding Mr. Moshe Zar, sadly, who his son was murdered, and talking about the IDF apparently has a policy that if terrorists turn away from them, they don't shoot them exactly. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sorry, say it again. I apologize. I didn't hear the last part.
The part where Mr. Moshe Zar was talking about his son was murdered in Samaria, and apparently IDF commanders did not shoot terrorists when they turned away. They have a policy.
Yes. Yeah, he just basically said, don't catch them, just kill them. And, he comes from the old school when Israel was coming up, and he was a soldier himself. You just can't pet these guys and say, bad boy, you did something wrong, go sit in the corner and wear a dunce cap. These guys need to be punished, and the punishment has to be promoted to saying, this is what's going to happen to you if you do this. There's nothing right now. I mean, some soldiers can even go to prison for not going through the proper policies that are stated in the IDF PC program. Did you shoot in the air? Did you have rubber bullets? Did you kiss them goodbye and hug them before you shot them? I don't know. There's a lot of things that are just too much for a soldier to do while he's got a major situation in front of him. A terrorist with an AK-47, with a knife. He doesn't have time to think about all these policies. He's got to think of self-preservation for not only himself but our country here in Israel. So he's got a lot of things that are on his plate, and I think Mr. Moshe Zar has had enough of it. He's seen too much of it, and it's costing us lives left and right. From the Temple Mount, with everybody playing politically correctness with the police, and we can't play political correctness in the Middle East. It doesn't exist. Just ask ISIS. They chop off somebody's head if they disagree with them. Israel strokes them, puts them in prison, makes sure they get 3 square meals, they get a university education. They can even get cellular phones, which Ayelet Shaked, now the new Ministry of Justice, has just revoked that law, allowing that. Some of the leftist liberals had gotten too far, and Zippy Libby was in charge of that. And she has just gone too far, and now she's out of office. I think the people have spoken and said they've had enough. And Moshe Zar is amongst those citizens that have said, we've had enough of this political correctness. Should not exist.
Do you think is that part? Because a lot of times I like to point out to people that Israel was started very much in a social movement. You had a lot of communists from Russia start this state that we have, and even though it's a great state, a lot of that ideology is still filtered in our culture in Israel. And I want to know if you think it filtered in the military, and that's part of the reason why there's just some insane policy that just don't make sense that are still in existence.
Well, you bring up a very good point. You have to remember that when Ben-Gurion was amongst it, he was more or less a socialist, communist mentality along the way, a Bolshevik mentality, coming from Poland and changing his name from Grun to Ben-Gurion. But you have to remember that this mentality has been groomed over decades. And yes, it does definitely exist. It's also in our laws, and when people get donations, and it creates power and corruptness within our ministries, they start to hurt the Jews and the citizens. For instance, crazy laws here where a wife or a woman can make a false complaint against a man without an investigation. He goes to prison. His life is ruined, and they can keep him life in prison if they wanted to by renewing something without major evidence showing that he didn't do anything. These laws are openly, see, look what we've done. We're coming down on our people. They're bad people. Well, if they continue to self-project from what's going on outside, the self-projection from outside inside, it's going to create a sick society of government. They've got to, they're doing it right now. They're cleaning it up. Ayelet Shaked is doing a tremendous job to get this ideology back to normalcy and use common sense. It went too extreme left under Zippy Livni and Herzog and a lot of others that were involved in them. Israel it definitely is the brightest rose in the toilet bowl in the Middle East right now. We should keep it that way and grow and grow and grow as a country. We've got great people here, fantastic people like yourself. Why shouldn't we be striving to be the best? We should be cutting down our prisons, cutting down our self-police for our people police themselves, teach them values in schools, and you won't have this problem. Put more money into education, as Bennett is attempting to do, and cut down all the pork, as you might say. Get it out because it's not kosher, and get it out of our system. And this is what we need. We need more education, and you'll have better students, you'll have better people, and keep the families together. Right now, it's been self-destruct mode with the Ministry of Welfare, with the social workers, 15,000 social workers in a country that only needs 3,000, and their word and power is so powerful that they can overrule a judge and somebody with limited education. That's scary. That reminds me of the Russian Bolsheviks that you just brought up. They've got to stop this persecution of its own citizens. They're good people. Develop them. Develop the families and the communities, and we'll have a fantastic country.
Yeah, I mean, the potential of Israel, of what they could do in a positive way is scary good, and I would like to see that happen. Last few minutes before we let you go, I want to tie everything together because even though we talked about ISIS, some of the potential war things, I know you feel Israel's still the safest place to be, partly because the situation in the United States with, we were talking about the troops going to the southwest. You posted on your Facebook about, we're going to tie this into a religious aspect of a rabbi warning about civil war in the United States. The Rimonov Rebbe visited Florida. I want to know if you could touch about that, because now we don't just have this from a tactical perspective, a spiritual perspective, your rabbi seeing potential civil war in the U.S., so if you could tell us a bit about that.
Well, sure. You brought up a diversion, a very smart issue you brought up, about that homosexuality was a diversion. No, he brought up the race card as diversion. Remember in Ferguson and Baltimore, where the police are hurting black people and so forth. Now that's a major diversion right there. So in my opinion, and the Rebbe is caught on to that, and it's in the Torah. I mean, Gog Magog is approaching. And here's another interesting thing. If you look at Obama, the way it's spelled, Vav, Bet, Mem, Hey, and so forth, if you were to just tweak it a little bit and move the letters around, Obama is no longer Obama. He's Moav in the Torah. So if you want to know who Moav is, that's your homework for today. Please look it up, and you'll find out, has Hashem put Obama here for the Jews to wake them up as Moav in disguise? Think about that one.
That's such an idea. I haven't thought of that angle, but we'll definitely gotta check that out. Very interesting take. Again, this has been another episode of Messiah Hour here on Israel Sports News Radio. My guest has been Paris David Blumenthal. He's the author of the book Time to Be Free 5173, which can be found on Amazon. You can also find Mr. Blumenthal on Facebook as well. Thank you so much for being a guest of my program. It's always a great pleasure, and it's been too long. I think it was in December last time you came on, so I apologize about that, but it's going to have you back, and I look forward to future interviews.
No apologies needed. It is always an honor and a pleasure to be on your show. Ari, thank you so much for what you're doing to help people, educate people with facts and figures and numbers and connecting the dots. You're doing a huge mitzvah. Thank you.
Well, that's nice you say, and especially coming from you. I take that as a huge compliment. And again, thank you for coming on, and have a great Shabbat, because we're recording this on Friday in case people are listening. And we will be in touch very, very shortly. So again, thank you so much.
Hashem bless you. Thank you. Shabbat.